And here today, November 18th, we have Dr. Robert Weir from University of Windsor, who will be talking about coins and the archaeologist. So Robert Weir will discuss his methodology for the identification of coins found in excavations, which are typically heavily corroded bronzes. By drawing on examples from the various sites he has worked on, he will discuss some of the interpretations that one can make from such assemblages. Everyone admires a beautiful and well-preserved coin of precious metal, but often the most useful information comes from much humbler pieces. Dr. Weir earned a BA at the University of British Columbia and both MA and PhD at Princeton University. Since 2002, he has been on the faculty in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Windsor. His main research activity has been the study and interpretation of coin assemblages from excavations in Greece, Cyprus, and hopefully also Turkey in the not-too-distant future. He also reconstructs the provenances of 16th, 17th, and 18th century books from their marginalia and ownership marks. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robert, for coming. I am going to stop my share, and everybody, and you're welcome to start to share and start to talk.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I will set up my screen. And as I do so, I just want to say, of course, I'm broadcasting from Windsor, Ontario, which finds itself on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, namely the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. Can everybody see that first slide, Coins and the Archaeologist? All right, good. So thank you for that introduction. Let's get started. For over 20 years now, I have been spending most of my summers working in the Mediterranean on coin assemblages from various digs. And the digs where I have done the coins are indicated by red stars here. I also add a blue star at Anamur in Turkey because I've been asked to help out with those coins, but I haven't had a chance yet to get over there. So what I'd like to do today is talk about some highlights from these 5 assemblages. I'll do a flying tour because time is limited, but I want to give you a sense of what it's like to work through excavation coins, coins that come up in digs that are not necessarily things of beauty. Everybody, of course, thrills to the idea of buried treasure, my students especially, when we do an archaeological practicum in Greece, which we do once every couple of years. Henri here is holding very proudly a 10-euro-cent piece that I salted in the ground while he was away on lunch break just to test whether he was good at digging and sieving and whatnot, and he passed the course because he did find that 10-euro-cent piece. But we all hope to find something ancient, of course, and sometimes we do. But I'm also here to, in one sense, temper expectations because what we find is typically underwhelming at first glance. But also I want to build up expectations because although the coins as physical objects may not be that beautiful, they often are very informative. And so that really will be the thesis of my presentation today. Of course, you never do find gold in excavations, and I'll give you 2 exceptions that prove the rule. Here is a coin found by a student from Wilfrid Laurier University. While I was a student volunteer myself at Mytilene back in May of 1989. While clearing the topsoil one day, she found this lovely little Ottoman gold piece from 1799 CE. And we all cursed her good luck, of course, because we always wanted to be the person who had found such a thing. And then the next day, she found this just a few meters away while pulling weeds in the topsoil, and beginner's luck. What more can I say? I've never since then come close to finding gold on excavation. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you know that most of what I will be showing you is not nearly as spectacular as this, but in its own way, very informative. So everybody loves the field work. That is the thing that brings the students in, and it has a mass media appeal, I guess. But a lot of the best results come from the lab, and the lab has its own thrills. I'm sure Marina can tell us all about the thrills and attendant dangers, perhaps, of working in a lab. Here's a sign that was put up one day in 2010 at the Isthmia Museum Apotheki storeroom, Warning, it reads, in March 2010, a snake said to be venomous attempted to settle in the 2009 Kenchreai sherd bags by the door. It was hunted down by a Greek squadron of lady guards and beaten up till a British ally decapitated it and set its corpse on a stone outside. No doubt it's a warning to other snakes. But be warned, others may come in unnoticed. Beware the vengeance of the speckled band. So I would say that work in the lab is just as thrilling and adventurous as anything in the field. And as I say, that's where the discoveries tend to happen. So what I'd like to talk about today is sort of a field archaeologist perspective on coins. And by way of starting my discussion, I give you a quote from a book written some 33 years ago by David Soren and Jamie James, a popular account of the excavations of Kourion at Cyprus. But one passage in particular caught my eye the other day. The director writes, "The hoard of bronze coins found in the 1985 season presented a special problem, for they were so badly corroded as to be completely illegible. That created something of a dilemma, indeed, almost a power struggle. I needed the coins cleaned as soon as possible for the purposes of dating and identification. But the conservatives, as is their wont, lobbied for the safest and slowest methods. The reader will perhaps not be surprised to learn that the dig director won out, particularly since the coins were hardly art treasures and were in very bad shape. So David Soren makes at least one good point here. The coins are often badly corroded and sometimes almost illegible, although in my experience, if you take the time and you have the patience, about 95% or sometimes more of coins will give you some kind of a reading and identification. But what I want to say today, where I'm going to take issue with Professor Soren here, is to point out that coins are really useful for more than just dating and identification. There is more to excavation coins than what I call the dating game. So as I say, I would like to give you a flying tour of 5 sites. And first of all, the site of Polis Chrysochous in Cyprus. This is a site where Princeton University has been excavating for a few decades now. And I came on board in 2018. I've only been there for about 10 days total in the summer of 2018, so I'm still gathering the data. There are about 2,000 coins in all, but Alan Stahl of Princeton is handling anything after about 500 CE, and I'm doing the Greco-Roman stuff. So that leaves me about 1,000 coins to play with. I've only had time to look at 300 of them, so my picture is still largely unformed, but I can make a few basic observations. We're talking about an assemblage that is nice and continuous from the 5th century BCE through to the 20th century CE, but the great majority of the stuff, at least the stuff I've seen, is of the 4th and 5th century CE, and this is common at many sites. Late Roman coins are very prevalent. What's notable about the assemblage from here? Well, we have a really nice, pretty much continuous record of coins for that whole 25 centuries or so. We have a number of scarce Cypriot, local Cypriot issues represented. And surprisingly, from the late Roman period, those rather cruddy looking nummi have turned up a few surprises, as far as I can tell. A surprising number of them are from the West, from Vandalic North Africa, or from Western mints in Italy. Challenges, yes, every site has its challenges. In this case, not all the coins that I've been asked to study are in the local museum. And I'm sure they're in the Paphos Museum or maybe Nicosia, and we'll get to see them eventually, but in the short term, that's a bit of a challenge. So Princeton has been digging a city site at Polis Chrysochous, the ancient city of Marion, rechristened Arsinoe by the Ptolemies after they destroyed Marion in 312. And Princeton has dug a number of trenches all over and underneath the village of Polis Chrysochous, including this classical period sanctuary, for instance. And here is the dig accommodations. I mean, I don't think I could say anything about coins and archaeology without at least touching on the standard of living. And this is Princeton quality accommodation. You see the kitchen block here and our little dining terrace, and there are some rooms in the building beyond. And we have our own little water tower. We're on the edge of the village of Polis Chrysochous. It is somewhat basic. It's beautiful. The doors don't lock, I should tell you that. The windows have no glass nor curtains. So I wake up with the sun because my room faces east, and that sun, once it rises, gets pretty darn hot as it shines onto your bed. So it's a fun place, but perhaps not for everyone. I enjoyed my time there, and I'm looking forward to getting back. There is a local museum a few hundred meters away from the excavation house, where a number of the Princeton artifacts are on display. And I must say that the staff there have been very friendly and accommodating. That is generally my experience in Greece and in Cyprus. And one season I was working at Anamur in Turkey back in the 1990s. Museum staff are very helpful, always bringing you drinks and snacks, and really wanting to expedite your efforts in any way they can. So I really can't say enough good things about the museum staff. So what do the coins look like? Well, I'll show you a few notable coins. I mentioned local issues, and the coin you see above is one of our prize pieces, I think. It's made locally in Marion, and it is one of maybe 2 or 3 known examples in the world, I think, of what I now know to be a die obol. And its weight is keyed, I believe, so that it is practically the same as the more common die obols of Salamis on the other side of the island of Cyprus. And there's even some similarity of types. There's a ram's head in both cases, and you have an animal, whether recumbent or licking at its leg on the other side. So I have a feeling, I'm evolving a theory that perhaps the Marion coins were meant to be exchangeable in Salamis or within the Salaminian sphere of influence. We also have a number of Ptolemaic period coins. The Ptolemies refounded Marion as Arsinoe, and we have quite a few rather scarce pieces that were minted at Paphos, which is about 40 kilometers away, I would want to say, 35 or 40 kilometers south of Polis Chrysochous. It was the Roman capital of Cyprus. So I show you a couple of examples here. So these are interesting objects. Other interesting objects that are also local issues are made by the Koinon, the league, the federation of Cypriot cities under the Romans. And a number of them, intriguingly, show the famous temple of Aphrodite at Palai Paphos, modern-day Koutsongila, which is a bit to the east of the modern town of Paphos. And these are always enjoyable to come across for their architectural representations. I really like these. So moving down in time, we have quite a lot of late Roman stuff, as I mentioned before. And here one can look in the late Roman period at mint marks and perhaps be able to say in the future something about the currency situation in Cyprus in the Roman period. And many of the late Roman coins come from Antioch, for instance, in the 3rd and early 4th centuries AD. We have a number of, by a number, I mean hundreds actually, hundreds, I believe, small nummi of the 5th century AD, the sorts of things that people tend to overlook. They're very scrappy looking. I had to look hard through my images to find some images that would be at least somewhat photogenic. And they all come from Eastern mints by and large. But as I mentioned before, there are exceptions because a surprising number, and I don't have a percentage yet, but a surprising number of our nummi, in fact, come from the West, from Vandalic North Africa, or from the Mint of Rome, say, like this example. So my impressions of Polis Chrysochous are still in flux, and I look forward to exploring some questions further, like that Marion coin, for instance, or how typical is it to have Western nummi in Eastern contexts like Cyprus. The site where I began digging as a student some 35 years ago almost, is Mytilene on the island of Lesbos. And We found in the 1980s here some 500 coins in all that I have recently written up for publication, and that manuscript is ready to go once I can find a home for it. The assemblage here is also quite broad, 4th century BCE through 20th century CE, although we have big gaps. We really don't have much that, say, after the 10th century AD, Byzantine stuff, we don't have much after that. Notable features, we have a very nice corpus of Mytilene's own issues in bronze from the Hellenistic and early Roman periods. And we also have a good assemblage of rare Gattilusi coins. The Gattilusi were a Genoese dynasty that ruled in Lesbos from the late 1300s until 1462. The challenges here, the one that first struck me is that the soil is highly corrosive to coins. A lot of them were, in the end, I have to admit, illegible. Another challenge is that one whole season's worth of coins, at least 50, as far as I can tell, are lost. They were all in the same big pickle jar with silica gel in the bottom. I last saw that jar as a student volunteer in 1990, and nobody has seen the jar since. One explanation, I think, is that the venue of the museum stores has been moved twice since then. And no doubt this jar was misplaced in a move. Whenever I or Professor Hector Williams go to Mytilene, we always initiate a search for the missing coins, but so far we've come up empty. And the third challenge is finding a suitable publication venue. The breadth of the assemblage is such that the article, what I've written up, is rather ungainly, and referees have suggested I break it up into smaller pieces. I'm a little reluctant to do that because I think I would really like to preserve the integrity of the assemblage, publishing it all together. But we have everything from 4th century BC through late Ottoman. And ideally, it should stick together. So I still need to work that out. So Lesbos, Mytilene rather, on the island of Lesbos, is on the east side facing Turkey. And for those who don't know the town, it has two harbors, a south harbor and a north harbor, with a peninsula between them. And this peninsula was originally an island off the shore of the rest of Lesbos, separated only by a small channel. And the original city of Lesbos, of Mytilene, say Sappho's Mytilene, was this island, which is nowadays the Acropolis, or rather, I should say, the site of the medieval castle that I'll be mentioning. The Canadian team that dug Mytilene's sites back in the 1980s, of which I and my wife were part, dug at two sites, what we called MYT 1 up on top of the Kastro, and MYT 2 down by the North Harbour in a vacant lot. MYT 1 had a very nice Demeter sanctuary, a women's only sanctuary, it seems, with hundreds of terracottas and lots of nice finds, chthonic offerings, and some pretty thrilling stuff. MYT 2 down by the North Harbour was a hodgepodge of different things. We have a section of the original city wall of Mytilene running right through the site obliquely, and at a higher level we have a large Roman house with an impluvium at the center. And as I mentioned, the coins of 1990 were likely lost in a move between museums. There are two museums in the town of Mytilene. There's the new museum and the old museum down on the South Harbour, and the coins were moved originally from the old museum to the new museum, and then about 10 years ago an earthquake hit, damaged the new museum, and so the coins had to be moved back again. And in one of other of those moves, the 1990 season coins were lost. So the excavation coins from Mytilene, as I say, are broad in scope. I had to teach myself how to read a bit of Arabic to decipher the Ottoman coins, and that was actually a welcome challenge. That was quite fun. As I say, the coins are highly corroded. The soil is very hostile, And the earliest coins we have, and in fact, about half of the 500 coins total are of this particular type. And I tried to choose an example that showed you something. I hope you can see maybe the top of the head of Apollo there on the left, and you might have to take my word for it that what's on the right is in fact a bull's head to right. You can perhaps see the truncation of the bust parallel to the left edge there. It's a little clearer in hand. These are small bronzes, about 10 millimeters. And one of the things I discovered after I discovered that the coins were very corroded and often quite worn as well, is that almost all the coins had been found in excavated context with nice pottery datings. And so when I consulted the British Museum catalogue of Mytilenean bronzes, a catalogue that dates back to the late 19th century, I realized that the chronology there was somewhat impressionistic and vague. It was based on stylistic criteria. But now I thought we could improve on it because we had firm pottery datings. And so I applied that. And so now for the first time in my manuscript, I feel confident in saying we have real absolute dates that we can apply to these bronze coins of Mytilene. But given the corrosion of the coins, many of them really didn't yield any surface details. So I evolved a technique that I applied in my manuscript, which is to look it's very simple, to look at the profile of the certainly identifiable bronzes, juxtaposing weight with diameter. And the examples I found tended to fall within a very specific area of that chart. And I then extrapolated to the uncertain bronzes, the ones I thought were probably Mytilenean of that Apollo bull's head type, but wasn't certain about. And if I apply that blue oval, I can see that certain of those unidentified bronzes certainly do fit that profile. And so one could suppose that they are quite likely of that same variety. So this is something that I included in my manuscript. So as I say, now for the first time, we have real dates that we can apply to the coins of Mytilene that we have in large numbers. Beyond the Hellenistic period, we have a number of issues, really quite rare issues, produced at Mytilene in the early Roman period. And I showed you one example here from the time of Tiberius, featuring himself and his mother Livia. The Kastro yielded many of our best finds, and here's a picture I took out of an airplane window. The plane just happened to fly right over the Kastro, which was great. And you will see that the fortifications here quite clearly. It is, in fact, by surface area, the largest castle in Greece. And it has a number of building phases. At the top right corner of it, that rectangular keep is Byzantine, but we also have Gattilusi period fortifications and Ottoman extensions of the circuit right down to the water on the left edge of the slide. So the Byzantine period, dated by the coins to probably the 9th and 10th century CE, is exemplified by the inner keep, which is in a good state of preservation and incorporates a number of spolia from earlier buildings, perhaps buildings associated with our Demeter sanctuary. My favorite spolia, and everybody's favorite spolia, in fact, are these gladiator carvings, perhaps from tombs of gladiators nearby that are incorporated into the walls of the Byzantine keep. And in that keep as well, we have what are clearly blocks from one or perhaps a couple of different temples built into one of the walls. In terms of coins, we're really restricted here to coins of the 800s and 900s CE. We don't have much of anything between the 4th century CE and the 9th century CE. So that's one of the gaps. And the other gap we have is after about 919 here until the coming of the Gattilusi in the late 1300s. These gaps are perhaps explicable by the fact that we have ceramic evidence and other archaeological evidence for the cleaning off of the Kastro site from time to time. So any earlier or any of the coins from the missing periods were perhaps part of that cleanup. I mentioned the Gattilusi family of Genoa. They acquired Lesbos when Francesco Gattilusio married a Byzantine princess, and this was her dowry, the whole island of Lesbos. And they certainly added to the Kastro and combined their coat of arms with that of the Palaeologus family. And much of the fortifications one sees there today date to their period of tenancy in the 1300s and 1400s. And some of the remains are really quite impressive. Two cisterns are particularly nice. The local antiquities service has done a great job of recovering the Gattilusi material and cleaning it up and making it accessible and having explanatory plaques. They have even recovered fragments of a couple of sarcophagi, presumably the bone boxes of members of the Gattilusi family, to judge from the coats of arms present on their surfaces. And one has an inscription too, so that also confirms that. Anyway, as regards the coins of the Gattilusi are really pretty scarce. I show you an example here of the first of the Gattilusi dynasty to rule in Lesbos, Francesco, the husband of the Byzantine princess. And I must say there's not a whole lot to see here. You can perhaps make out a cross on the obverse on the left and a sort of fish scale pattern within an oval on the reverse on the right. We have a lot of coins of Dorino Gattilusio. These are all very, very scarce items, and I think this is a potential field of further investigation. Perhaps the anonymous referees of my manuscript are right. Maybe I should break my manuscript up into chunks and do a separate monograph on the Gattilusi coins, because as I say, they are quite scarce, and there's every indication, I think, that they were minted right here on the Kastro. This was the center of Gattilusi power on the island, so it would make sense for their mint to be there too, I imagine. After the Gattilusi pass away in 1462, the Ottomans take over, and a lot of what you see within the Kastro grounds today is the remains of an Ottoman town that flourished, in fact, until about 100 years ago, until the infamous exchange of populations between Greece and Turkey in the early 1920s. An ethnic cleansing, really. And so here too, the antiquities authorities in Lesbos have done a great job of finding these ruins and consolidating them and erecting explanatory plaques. For instance, just beside our Demeter sanctuary, just 10 meters away from it, is an Ottoman mosque, and we did some test trenches around it and partly underneath it and found a Christian church underneath, perhaps the Gattilusi chapel, and burials there, perhaps also members of the family. We're more or less at the highest point of the Kastro here with this mosque. The local antiquities authorities have repaired and explained a medresa, a theological college for students of the Quran, and a hammam, a bathhouse, and a number of other structures as well. As for coins recovered, we find these at both MYT1 and MYT2, both on the Kastro and down in the Panoscala, but especially up on the Kastro. We have a nice range of Ottoman coins. I just want to show you a couple of examples. As I say, I had to learn a little bit of Arabic to decipher names and dates. Here's another piece. A number of them are pierced, which was really very common right up until the 20th century, certainly. Pierced for suspension so they could be worn. And knowing that there was an Ottoman village here, I can't help but think that those 2 gold coins found by that lucky student volunteer back in 1989 may in fact have been dropped by one of the refugees of the 1920s, somebody with a coin collection perhaps leaving in a hurry and had to, these things perhaps fell out of a box or a bag and he couldn't stop or she couldn't stop to pick them up. Moving now to the mainland of Greece, I will talk about Kenchreai next. This is like the Polis project, another American excavation, although there is a synagogia component as well. Part of the project is a synagogia, a cooperative excavation with the local antiquities authorities. And so really, numismatically, I personally am considering two different sort of sub-projects here. I'm involved with the more recent American dig that's known as the Kenchreai Cemetery Project, but the director of KCP, Joe Reif of Vanderbilt University, has asked me to examine the earlier coins found by Scranton back in the 60s and 70s in the harbor itself, and perhaps republish those because the initial publication of those, Kenchreai coins had its problems. There were a number of errors, and in some cases the numismatist didn't try very hard to get a good identification. And I've had the luxury of a number of seasons going back to Kenchreai to work on this some more. So one Kenchreai Cemetery Project article is in press, should be out by the end of 2021. In fact, the other is in limbo. I haven't heard lately what's up. The reason there's a subdivision in two is the one in press is the synagogia finds, and the limbo article is the American project only from I think 2008 to 2010. And the director and I have decided in the last couple of months that the best way to get the revised data on the Scranton coins out there is not so much to do a hard copy publication, but to upload my new data and photos to a special website. Here too, we have quite a comprehensive range of coins, anything from the 5th century BCE through the 12th century CE, though here too there are gaps. There's almost nothing between the Slavic invasion of the Greek peninsula in the late 500s, almost nothing between then and the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I in the early 1100s. And most of our coins are late Roman, 4th to 5th century CE. Notable features here, long periods of circulation for the small change, gold bracteates, I'll show you some of those later, some very intriguing gold objects modeled on coins, and a number of rare Roman provincial issues. Challenges, the synagogia has presented a few challenges in past seasons, challenges of miscommunication and misinterpretation, and occasionally there's a bit of friction, but things are moving along. And perhaps more seriously, 200 or more of the Scranton era coins are missing from the Isthmia Museum and from the Corinth Museum too. I've checked in both places. So those I cannot update. So the harbor that was dug by Scranton and his colleagues back in the 60s and 70s is the East Harbor of Corinth. It includes a pier, and you see here an early Christian church, in fact, built on top of one of the Roman piers of Augustan date. And the American dig of the last of this century is on the Koutsongila Ridge at the north end of the Kenchreai Harbor. This ridge overlooks the Kenchreai Harbor and contains a large cemetery, a cemetery that has a number of different periods. It seems to have been first set up as a cemetery, as far as we can tell, in the 2nd century AD. There's some prominent built tombs. You see foundations for one of them here, overlooking the cemetery, and these date to the 2nd century AD. Because under one of them, under a cornerstone, like a foundation deposit, I think, we found a number of well-preserved sestertii of Trajan and Hadrian, this one among them. In front of those built tombs, there was a road that ascended from the harbor and headed north and east up to the isthmus. But as we were digging, we quickly found that this road was peppered with later tombs when the road went out of use. Small tombs were dug into the relatively soft limestone bedrock. And here is one of those tombs as it was found back in 2007 with the headstone still in place and covered. And the image on the right shows you some of the bones we found when we dug down. There are coins in these tombs, and the inscription on the headstone indicates that the occupant of this particular tomb, a fellow by the name of Andreotas, son of, let's see, I believe it's Coroneus. Anyway, he was Christian. He was Christian, and that puts an interesting light on some of the things I'm going to be showing you because there's a curious pattern that you'll see. So the poorer people are buried in these very small tombs cut into the former roadway. Richer folks have nice family mausoleums, you could say, higher up the hill with views eastwards over the cliff and across the sea. Here is one of the built, or excuse me, excavated tombs in the bedrock. And as you can see, we have traces of painting quite nicely preserved here. And you'll see that especially in this image. The dead were inhumed sometimes and laid out in long niches, but we also found cremated remains in smaller niches. And among the dead, we found a number of coins. And what is curious about the coins from the Kenchreai Cemetery, and this is something that is coming out in the publication that's coming out at the end of this year, is that the number of coins, were often antiques. The burials in these tombs are no earlier than the 2nd century AD, and the cemetery seems to have been in use through to at least the 5th century CE. So it's in use for 300 years, mid to late Roman. But the coins that are found with the deceased are, by and large, late classical and Hellenistic. For instance, coins of Sicyon, like this one. Also, a number of the coins we have found are very heavily worn. I show you on the left a typical Kenchreai coin of Ptolemy III, and you might have to take my word for it unless you look really closely, but there's a vague silhouette there of Ptolemy's bust, and just to clarify what you should be seeing, I include a nice unworn specimen on the right. So the coins are of early date, but most are highly worn, very worn. And they are found in mid to late Roman tombs, and that gave us a bit of pause. I mean, there are also coins from Corinth that are more contemporary in date, such as this coin showing the Isthmia sanctuary on the reverse, or the shrine of Melicertes at Isthmia on the reverse. But the more contemporary coins that we found in the cemetery, a number of them are very strange too. You see here a coin that's been deliberately holed. Perhaps it was nailed to the wall of one of the tombs. It's a coin of Nero, and it's from Samos. And there are very few known examples of this type, just 2 or 3 known examples, I believe, in the world. So this is a rare coin. And here's another rare coin, also from Samos. It was found also in one of these tombs associated with the corpse. I know of 2 other examples of this particular medallion of Commodus from Samos. So half facetiously, I wonder if this was a cemetery for coin collectors. If not for coin collectors per se, then for people who appreciated old or unusual rare coins. Here's another one of our rarities. Indeed, so far as I can tell, this coin may be unique. I certainly can't find a parallel for it in any of the major references. I'm not entirely sure of the mint, but I think Phenios in Arcadia near Stymphalos is the mint. I mentioned bracteates. These are gold foil ornaments weighing about ½ a gram or so that are formed by being wrapped around coins. We have 6 bracteates, and 5 of the 6 are modeled on Hellenistic coins of Sicyon, but they're found in mid to late Roman grave contexts. Perhaps these are symbolic payments for the ferryman. And so this would be strange if the occupants are, by this point in time, the late Roman period, if they are indeed Christian, as some of them in this cemetery do seem to have been. Why would they need a gold coin for the ferryman? A gold coin that in fact recalls coin types of yore, of centuries before, antique coin types. Another curious thing we found, and this was in the 2008 season, was right on the edge of the cliff, which has been eroding over the centuries. We found half of an octagonal structure. So we simply called it the octagon. And I'm wondering if it might not be a martyrium, because martyria often have an octagonal shape in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the only famous person to have come from Kenchreai is the deacon Phoebe. If you read the book of Acts in the Bible, Phoebe of Kenchreai, who goes to Rome, and that's really all we know about her, but perhaps her bones are repatriated centuries later. My blue arrow points to one of the cornerstones there, because when we dug underneath that, we found a little hoard or foundation deposit of exactly 13 coins of late Roman date. The latest of them dates to about 425 AD. And these 13 coins are of 13 different types. In other words, it seems to me that somebody very deliberately chose 13 different kinds of coin to put in there. Christ and the 12 apostles, maybe? Is there some symbolic value? I'm not sure, but it is intriguing, and that's what suggests to me that this octagon was a special building, quite possibly a martyrion. The other odd thing about Kenchreai, and here it's a bit like Polis and Cyprus, is we have a lot of coins from the West in the 5th century CE, such as this coin of the ephemeral emperor Libius Severus, minted in Rome. By the West, I mean not only Italy, but Vandalic North Africa too. We have lots of Vandalic issues. And here's one of our last issues before the Slavic invasion of the Greek peninsula in about 580, a Byzantine piece of Justin II and his wife Sophia, minted in Antioch. Now, in working through the Scranton coins, the coins from the Scranton excavation in the harbor itself, not from the cemetery above the harbor, usually what I'm looking at are small nummi, like you see here. And as I say, in my experience, the fellow Bob Holfelder, who published the Scranton era coins, perhaps quit a little too soon. Most of these, if you're patient enough, do yield up at least some kind of identification. Despite their rather scrappy nature, you can say this is a coin of so-and-so based on the monogram, for instance. The fourth site I'd like to show you quickly is the site of Stymphalos, a Canadian dig in the mountains of Northeast Arcadia. This is now partially published by me. I have published the coins from the Athena Sanctuary in a volume put out by the University of Toronto in 2014, and coins from a hoard I've also published in the American Journal of Numismatics. And so what I need to do still is to publish about 300 coins from the residential area of the town of Stymphalos. Here we have a more limited profile, 4th century BCE through early 1st century CE, most of it being Hellenistic. What is notable here? A lot of our coins are of silver, a full 10%. Normally in excavations, bronze coins are 99% or more of the assemblage. But here we have 10% silver coins. We also have a nice hoard that was found in an excavated context. In fact, by one of my students one day, July 27th, 1999, about 2:30 p.m. I remember it well, actually. Right after lunch, we were all kind of tired and hot and a little sleepy from lunch, and boom, her handpick just busted open a clod of earth that turned out to be full of silver and bronze coins. We also have evidence from Stymphalos of mercenary wages. That perhaps explains all the silver, returning mercenaries with their pay. Challenges. For Stymphalos, we have a site with very little traditional history, almost nothing in the literary sources. So we're really reliant on the material culture to write the history of the place. And here the material is split between two museums, a local museum, a nice new one in the Stymphalia Valley, and the museum in ancient Corinth, about 50 kilometers away. This is what Stymphalos looks like. It's a valley about 10 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide. It's beautiful. That's Mount Kyllene, where Hermes was born, in the background there, and Lake Stymphalia in the foreground. And the ancient city is on a low hill in the middle distance. In fact, here is the ancient Acropolis of Stymphalos, a city that was built in the second quarter of the 4th century BC, right after the Battle of Leuctra. There had been a polis here before, we know that, from at least the 5th century BC and probably earlier. But what we found is a little later, a planned town of the 4th century BC that was destroyed suddenly and violently, it seems, in about the year 38 CE. Now, one notable thing about the assemblage from Stymphalos is how little of Stymphalos' own coins we have. At Mytilene, we had a lot of local coins. 85% of the coins at Mytilene were Mytilenean. At places like Kenchreai, we've got a lot of Corinthian coins. Stymphalos never made many coins, and so only 1% of the assemblage is locally minted, such as this small silver obol of the mid-4th century BCE. I mentioned a hoard. This was found in the basement of one of the big fortification towers on the city walls by one of my students, I say, one sleepy afternoon in July of 1999. We were digging down near virgin soil, and her handpick blew open a hoard. And that was wonderful because it gave us a nice chronological fix on the building of this tower and, by extension, the fortifications of Stymphalos, for which we didn't really have much of an idea up to that point. So I've published this hoard in the American Journal of Numismatics about a dozen years ago. And here's just some of the data on that. 14 coins total, 8 silver, 6 bronze, ranging in date from about 350 BC down to the 290s, the 280s maybe BC. And the hoard is very useful for dating previously undated coins of Phlius and Phenios, 2 nearby mints, and they help give us, as I say, a chronological fix on the construction of the city fortifications, since they were found right above, this hoard is found right above virgin soil. I mentioned also that we have evidence for mercenary wages because we find some unusual pieces, like that silver tetradrachm of Seleucus I of Syria, or a bronze fraction on the right there from Carthage. The men of Arcadia were famous for hiring themselves out as mercenaries in the late classical and Hellenistic periods. So that shouldn't be too surprising. And as I say, this perhaps explains the relatively large amount of silver that we find in the excavation. We also have evidence, I believe, of foreign troops stationed at or passing through at least ancient Stymphalos. There may well have been a Macedonian garrison here in the early 3rd century BCE, and quite possibly it was the Macedonians who built the walls that we have, because we've got about 10% of our coins are Macedonian, and we have rare evidence of early Roman presence, or at least Roman troops passing through here with this fourré or plated denarius of the year 150 BCE, according to Crawford's chronology. One doesn't usually find denarii in Greece at this point in time outside of military contexts. Our latest coins from Stymphalos, 38 CE, first year of Caligula. And we have a couple of them, and here's one of them, all in very fresh condition and found in destruction context. So that suggests to me that some calamity befell the city at that point in time, perhaps an earthquake, or maybe the lake flooded, as it does from time to time. Finally, I'd like to talk about Helike. All the finds found up to 2014 are now published, a few more dribbling out, but most of the work here is done. We're looking at a site with a context ranging from the 4th century BCE to the 5th century CE, most of it being Hellenistic. Most coins come from a nice sealed context, sealed by a destruction in about 150 BC. And my very last couple of slides will show you a brand new and very interesting coin of Helike itself. The challenge here is that a number of the older finds from the earlier seasons are now inaccessible in a museum storeroom. There's a clash of personalities I don't really want to get into, but it's hard to access the earlier material. Helike is on the Gulf of Corinth, and here is a view down to the very fertile plain of Helike. About 80% of our coins come from a dye works of Hellenistic date that was destroyed suddenly around 150 BCE. And we have a wide variety of mints represented, mostly the Peloponnese, but also places a bit farther afield like Athens. And once again, Macedonia, which is a little curious. One suspects perhaps there were Macedonian troops here because bronzes, generally speaking, don't travel very far outside their areas of issue. So I keep thinking this must be evidence for military payroll. On the floor of the dye works, we found about 80% of our coins scattered on the floor of the dye works, right under a destruction layer of roof tiles and debris. Perhaps another earthquake hit here. Earthquakes rumble through here every few centuries, or perhaps it was the Romans, and the year was possibly 146 BC. But the coin of Sicyon on the right is one of the coins that we find from that late context. Now, there are numerous things I've been able to do with the data from Helike. I don't want to get into too many details. I've looked, for instance, obviously, at where the coins come from, and Sicyon's contribution is, as you can see, the lion's share of the pie chart, about 65%, but 10% is Macedonian. That's very similar to the proportion we have at Stymphalos. And Achaean League is respectable at 5%, and various other cities contribute too. One thing that has been very interesting is this scatter of about 80% of our coins on a factory floor in a nice sealed context. I've been able to work out an attrition curve, and some of the coins lying on that floor were 200 years old when that destruction happened. And so I've been able to calculate a curve, and it's an attrition curve of about 2% per annum, 2% a year, which is quite low. I think that Helike, like perhaps Kenchreai as well, was starved for small change, and coins stayed in circulation for centuries and centuries, literally. Outside of the Hellenistic factory, we have a Roman highway that has yielded up some Roman finds from around the Peloponnese. We also have a Roman period cemetery of the 4th century CE. The bodies are typically covered with roof tiles, and there might be a half amphora inverted to form a funnel for liquid offerings, perhaps, down to the deceased. When the roof tiles were lifted off this particular grave, we in fact found 2 bodies, not one, male and female, embracing one another. I like to think of this as Romeo and Juliet, perhaps, with simple ornaments, and in the mouth of one of the skeletons, a coin, a bronze coin. You see it uncleaned there as it came from the ground. I was able to suss out that it was Constantine I, and you see that coin again here at the top right. Constantine, in fact, precisely the year 320 CE from the Siscia mint. And from the cemetery, we have other coins that come up as well. Our latest coins from Helike, excuse me, are of about 425 AD. So I will close with this enigmatic coin that came up in the 2009 season, but took a number of years to properly clean and conserve. It's heavily corroded, but you can see little clear windows at the center of each side. At first, I thought I was dealing with an Achaean League bronze, but then I realized it was too heavy, it was too broad, and the style was all wrong, the artistic style. And legend traces suggested it was something quite else, quite different. What I believe we have here, and this is my final slide, is the prototype for all of the Achaean League bronzes of later centuries. This new coin, I have assigned a date of about 300 BCE too, on the basis of metrology and the style, and other various considerations, more than a century earlier than the famous Achaean League bronzes. So at this point in time, 300 BCE, Helike and Aegion were fighting for control of the Achaean League, and Aegion would become the capital of the Achaean League in 280 BC. But I think as late as 300 BCE, Helike was still fighting, and this is significant because until Professor Katsonopoulou dug at Helike from the year 2000 on, it was assumed the site was totally destroyed by a famous earthquake and tsunami in 373 BC. But our excavations have proved that Helike not only survived, but I think thrived. In any case, my time is up. My alarm just went off, so I will stop there, and that is the end of my show.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions.